talk about today is, the title of this was Seed Savers Unite, because we're all interested in sharing what we know about seeds and growing with everyone. And as we go through the program today, you're going to be seeing a lot of different types of seeds and ways to take care of them. And we will all have, as best friends in the future, these little brown envelopes that say what it is and when we got it. And it's really important to show when you saved the seed. I pulled out some that I had forgotten. I'll use that as a word. And I looked on the back of them, and they were some that were like 11 years old. So I went ahead and planted them, and we chatted, and a few of them did come up. You never know. So just because the seed packet says it's expired, you might want to give it a try anyway. Put it in a place that it's not as conspicuous. So anyway, that's what we are going to be talking about today. So what is a seed library, and where can you find one, and what is its purpose? So first of all, the purpose is we need to save seeds. How many of us have left the seed heads on our plants and they've fallen on the ground, and we think, well, dadgummit, I didn't want to grow that there this next year when they're popping up everywhere. Or I think, I'll plant some more next year, and I can't find that seed. So several groups have started seed libraries in the state, and we think that this is a good idea for us out here to be able to share seeds for plants that will grow. And the cost will be like free as far as getting seeds. So to me, that's the best price. Most of us know friends who have seeds, who will say, hey, I'm gathering seeds off my plants. Do you want some? And of course, everybody's going, yes. And so we share a lot among ourselves, but that doesn't always get them out to other people who would like to have them shared with them. So that's what it is, minimum cost. And so some of the seeds libraries are in public libraries. And some of them are at extension offices. Some of them are just in a variety of places. So, and we want to be involved in it so that we can educate you about the seeds. Maybe we'll have some things that you've never grown. And this would be an opportunity to try it out, learn what to do with the seed, and then also have a new friend in your yard. I'm not going to read everything that is on here. It is just important to save what we can. I know we were going around out in the demonstration gardens this morning and clipping off some of the seed heads so that will be things that we can share with folks. Now, not all seeds are going to germinate. We know that, and they're going to talk about it. As far as the seed library, we're going to try and put things in there that we know will, but sometimes if you have a 50% germination rate, that's a pretty good rate. I've had things that have not had 50%, obviously. And there are different kinds of seed libraries. I love the one that took the old card catalog and arranged it like that. Actually, we've been kind of out looking for a card catalog. Not that we're going to have that many seeds to start with, but it's just such a cool look. And painted, it's just exciting. So we like that one. Some of them are just in boxes, and I love the one that's in an old suitcase. And the beauty of that is when you go out to make presentations or to work in projects, you can just take your suitcase with you and have the seeds available right there. So that's another possibility that we're looking at. Okay, so how do you use a seed library? We're not going to have library cards, but you just come in and talk to us, Now, some of the places may have cards or some type of identification for you. We're still exploring that, but as of right now, we're saying no. And but we do want to keep a record of what is taken, because that shows what people are interested in, and that way we can be sure that we're harvesting more seeds that people want. And we're going to do all kinds, veggies, herbs, flowers, everything. Now, is there a limit? Now, we looked at some of the seed libraries around the state, and some of them say you can come in and get 3 types of seeds and that's it. Maybe you can come back in a week or a month and get more. We're exploring what we want to do here. You know, we'd love to have feedback, but we can't have one person come in and then just totally wipe us out, because then that defeats the purpose of having it available for a lot of companies. So there may be some restrictions on the numbers you can get. And as far as cost, we don't plan on having a cost for our seeds. We're hoping to get enough donations, and from what we have, to be able to stock the seed library. Now, just because you could come into ours and get things free, you can't assume that it would be like that if you go to a different seed library. So always ask if there is a charge. If they don't up front say, these are free, take your 3, or they're in the sign. Now, if you have seeds you want to donate, there are going to be some restrictions on that. We need to make sure that they're not registered or trademarked plants where you really are not supposed to be selling those. We may share those seeds, but you could only have those plants, but we would let you know that. Also, we need to make sure if it's something that's invasive, that we mark it invasive. I bought a plant that was labeled, I will admit, I'm an off the sale rack plant buyer. You know, I think I can resurrect almost anything. I'm wrong, but I really try. The price is right, you know, I'll try it. And it was marked Daisy. And, you know, if it's just a stem, I couldn't tell. I trust you, it's a daisy. So I planted 2 of them. And, of course, they grew. And I was like, oh, gosh, you know, that, good deal, good job, you know, that's going to be a great addition to the bed. And they grew, and I thought, this isn't a daisy. I don't know what I have. Well, by the time it got about like that, I realized I have mulberries. And I'm like, great, mulberry, daisy. I mean, you know, when they're this tall, the stem's the same. So, you know, we need to be sure we know exactly what we have, so that we don't give people surprises. Because some of the surprises are not necessarily good surprises. So if they're donated, you know, if you have some you want to donate to us, we'll have to ask some questions before we put it in there. And not that we distrust you or anything, but you know, we just want to be able to pass along information. Like, we need to know the name of the plant, the botanic name if you know it, and then any information, color of flower, or the variety of the vegetable, because there are a lot of different kinds of tomatoes, and so we would need to know that. So the local seed libraries, of course, we're going to have one. We're going to house it out of the extension office here. We're still working on the logistics, like if we're going to be open like one morning a week or one morning every 2 weeks. But we'll get that information out. And then there will be someone, a master gardener here, to help you get your seeds. And then to also answer any questions that you might have. So that's what we're going to be doing. Now, the Abilene Public Library has also talked about doing a seed library next year. And don't know how that one's going to work for sure, but we're going to be assisting with that, you know, what hours or what kind of plants or whatever. So potentially we could have 2 seed libraries here in Abilene. And you know, there's room for 2 seed libraries in a place this size. So I just think that, you know, this is going to be a good addition to helping educate the public, educate us too. I now know the difference between mulberry and a daisy. Yeah, I'm very educated on that. And it's been about 7 or 8 years, and I still have that stinking mulberry come up every year. So I don't know, it's crazy. Do y'all have any questions about seed libraries or what to expect or anything? Okay. Now make sure, did everybody get an agenda and the evaluations and a place to make notes if you want to make some notes? Okay. And did all of y'all get a ticket for door prizes? If not, then we need to get you registered and get that information to you. Okay, so I think that's it.
What should you do? I have a place that I bought, and there's an old building, and there are some seeds in there, and I have no, there's some seeds in there, in jars, and I have no idea what they are. So should I just try to maybe start them in a container and see?
You could, and see what comes up. You know, it could be a total surprise. You may have something brand new. But I wouldn't just, if you have no idea what the seeds are, I would not make that the focal part of a bed anywhere. But I would try them in a pot or in an area just to see what does come up, because they may be great. But if they're in a jar and they haven't been used in years, they may or may not be viable, right? We also have talked about maybe doing bulbs at some point through our library, because we probably all have a few daylilies or irises to share.
As a follow-up to that question, are there statewide seed repositories where people are educated about what seed looks like, so that you can at least get it in your family? I mean, when I went to college, I took a couple classes on identifying commercial seeds, and, you know, that's the seeds, I just don't know the seeds are here.
My go-to place, it would be Texas A&M, because they're in charge of the Master Gardener program, and they do a lot of experimenting and diagnosing and naming. So that would be there. And Texas Tech also has a lot of the plant ecology.
Jackie, can I address that?
Yes, and Beth will address it too.
One of the things I have found, I'm loud, I don't do that. One of the things I've found that when I'm trying to identify things, whether it's a plant or a bug or whatever, is start Googling it. Try to describe it, and you'll be surprised how quick you'll find something. So you might say, you know, seed is 1/4 inch, narrow, black, pointy on the ends, and see what comes up, you know? And you might be surprised, or it may at least give you some, sometimes I hit images, it'll give me pictures, and then I can kind of match it together. I'm always amazed what I can end up finding on the computer when I just ask it a question. So that's another option. I don't know if there's any state repositories.
I would just say the university.
Yeah, probably would be the best. But I think if you're just trying to do it real quick, probably try Googling it that way. You might be surprised what you find.
Or if you're close to some of these seed companies, if you take the seed in with you, I know Native Texas and the wildflower seeds, I mean, there are a number of them around the state. And, you know, if you have the seed, they could probably look at it, because that's their job, because they see seed all the time. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. We're going to turn it over to Sarah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we could do.
We'll do me first and then we'll do more.
Yeah, it's. I was just going to see him. Okay, let me get room.
it okay? Okay. I'm going to talk just briefly about seed basics. We thought it was important that we all kind of get on the same page with vocabulary and what are we talking about, because really, I fear, or my concern is that, it's exciting, you go get these seeds, but then really, by the time you get them home, you're like, I don't really know what to do with these seeds. And so there's no sense in going and checking out a whole bunch of seeds from the seed library and then just sitting in your cabinet. So, we're going to talk just a little bit about basics. So what I've decided to do first is just start with a traditional seed packet, okay? This is just a seed, I love tomatoes of all shapes, sizes, and colors. So most of my examples are going to be tomatoes. But I just thought it's really quite incredible the amount of information on a seed packet. And if we pay attention to that, it tells us quite a bit. So the first thing is that it is in fact a tomato. It's organic and biodynamic. Okay, organic, I think we all have a pretty good grasp of that. They're not man-made chemicals on there. But just because something is grown organically, arsenic is organic, right? It's a natural compound. It is poisonous, so it doesn't necessarily mean one thing or the other, just that it's not a man-made necessarily concoction, It's an organic thing. Typically, we associate this with less pesticides, more natural fertilizers, and those kinds of things. Biodynamic, frankly, I had to look up. And so I just have a little printout. And basically what it's talking about is biodynamic is kind of taking it a step further. It's having your whole farming ecosystem together. So we're using animals in a way that's productive for fertilizer, which is productive for, sustainable watering things, sustainable trees. The whole kind of ecosystem is in balance, I guess, is what I'll say. I don't really know much about that. San Marzano, that's the variety of tomato. I'll tell you many, many times on the, and you can tell from this one, the picture on the seed packet is not necessarily what your vegetable or plant or fruit or whatever is going to look like. Okay? They just put this tomato picture on all their tomato plants, seeds. And so, this San Marzano's aroma tomato, which isn't even really depicted up here. It's more of a sauce tomato. It's one you would make for a tomato paste, those kinds of things. So don't pay any attention to the picture. For all the information that's on the seed packet, don't pay attention to the picture. So then, what it tells us on the back of this is it tells us what year it was packed at the top, and it tells you down here that the minimum germination standard is 80%, and the usual seed life is 3 years. So Jackie was kind of talking about this. So what they're saying is that 80% of these seeds should germinate. So if you planted them all, a good, successful, what they're going to consider a good rate is 80%. I will tell you that I think we normally get much higher rates. We're not planting them typically in the fields. Tomatoes are typically they should be started indoors. And my germination rate is really very close to 100%. Okay? So the usual seed life is 3 years. Well, really what that's talking about, it's not like your seeds go bad. It's not like food, What it's just saying is that your seeds may not be as productive. And so that germination rate is going to go down and down and down the older your seeds get, presumably. And so that's why Jackie was saying, hey, plant them, see what happens, Just because you have them, you don't really know how old they are, give them a shot. If you want 1 or 2 of them, plant them all and see what happens. Seed depth. So the seed depth is telling us how far down the seed needs to be planted in the soil. So in this case, we're going to plant them about 1/4 of an inch. That's not very deep. The seed spacing, we'll talk about that in a minute. The soil temperature for germination, you'll see it needs to be really over 70 degrees Fahrenheit. How many days is it going to take to germinate? This is interesting. It says 6 to 14 days. So by the time you put your seeds, and we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of how to do that later today, but when you put your seeds in there, you need your temperature of the soil to be a little bit room temperature or warmer. And in about 6 to 14 days, you'll have little seedlings come up. And then it tells you to thin the plants to 18 to 36 inches. We'll talk about that. Tomatoes, I put them in seed cells, and again, we'll talk about that a little later. Anyway, we'll talk about that. So sowing indoors or sowing outdoors. What they're saying there is, should you start the seed inside or should you start the seed outside? And so in this case, it says sowing indoors is recommended, sowing outdoors is not recommended. Really, starting tomato seeds, like just planting them in your ground, is not a very successful way to start tomatoes. You either need to buy transplants or start your own seeds. If you put them in the ground, you might get one. I've never really had any success for that at all. And so it's just telling you right here, don't throw them in the ground, they're not going to grow. It's just not any good. And it says start seeds 6 to 8 weeks before the anticipated transplant date, which means if you want to transplant these into your garden in March, then you need to back it up. You need to start these in late January, early February. That way, your little tomato plant has turned into a little seed, has turned into a transplant. Then we're going to harden it off, and then we're going to take it outside and plant it. Okay. This is talking about growing tips to promote early growth and better yield. Use floating row covers, mulches, all that kind of stuff. Well, that's great, but right now we're talking about seeds. These are in our protected environment. We're not going to mulch them. We're not going to put row covers on them. You know, for seeds, we're just going to start them in our house. And then fertilize. It says, as transplants, fertilize with fish emulsion or dilute fertilizer. And I did bring some fish emulsion that I'll show you later, that I do use for starting seeds. It doesn't smell good, but it works. All right, so then it tells us 78 days. 78 days from the time it goes into the ground, under ideal conditions with proper watering and fertilization, you'll have a tomato in 78 days. Talks about the type, the aroma type, blah, 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 blah. And it tells you how big these tomatoes are going to get. And you're going to see this in varying units. So this one tells us it's 5 inches long. Sometimes they'll tell us how much they weigh. Sometimes it'll say a nice 2-inch diameter tomato. So you just kind of have to look, you'll have to compare them kind of with your head. And then an indeterminate tomato. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on this, but tomatoes are generally indeterminate or determinate. And that does make a difference. And we can talk about that if you want to, but that's a little beyond the scope of this presentation. Any questions about the seed packet? Okay, so the variety is clearly listed. Usually the side will be listed, but it's not consistently measured. That's what I was kind of talking about last time, the different diameters or how long it's going to be or that kind of a thing. Days to germination, how long before how long to get a plant. So days to germination is how long before the seed sprouts. So that's how long you should expect it to have this little, they all pretty much look exactly the same. This little green stem with 2 little leaves. Those little leaves do not represent really the vegetable that you're going to get. So those 2 little leaves, those first 2 little leaves, look the same pretty much on a whole bunch of plants. But then your next set of leaves, that's when we start talking about, okay, this is the variety. You'll be able to tell that's a tomato. You'll be able to tell if it's an eggplant, those kinds of things. Okay, this is my word of caution. Seed catalogs, you can get them from all over. They're across the United States. And you're going to see a whole bunch of award-winning tomatoes. Yeah. The mortgage lifter is the best tomato they've ever seen. Well, the mortgage lifter tomato is a giant tomato that will never grow in the state of Texas. Our growing season just doesn't accommodate that. What we're looking for is kind of short to medium long-term days, how many days it takes to actually grow the tomato, because as we've seen particularly this year, once the temperature gets too high, the tomato's not going to flower, it's not going to produce a tomato. And so we don't want something with a 100 days. I mean, you can play with it and try it, but typically that's not going to be as successful. And I would say this with all of the seeds that you find. You know, the best marigolds, the best, you know, all of the seeds, those award-winning, you need to figure out where they gave that award from. You know, if that award came from Minnesota, that's great, but that doesn't mean anything to us here in Texas. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about the difference between heirloom seeds and hybrid seeds. Heirloom seeds, kind of going out on a limb here, I don't really know, but I think that's where our focus is going to be as a seed library. Heirloom seeds are open pollinated, which means if you do collect the seeds and then you plant them, you will very likely get a very similar plant. that you got the seeds from. They're typically older varieties. Heirloom seeds are much more unusual even within the same variety. You can have some different coloring, different shaping, different sizes. They're just a more unique seed, which produces a more unique plant, which produces a more unique fruit. They may not be as productive as hybrids. They're not designed for that. You know, they're designed, they weren't designed, frankly. They came to us in nature, and that's what we're still planting. They're considered more flavorful, and you will hear particularly, you know, old-timer farmers and my grandparents, and they're going to say, oh, nothing like an heirloom tomato. It's the very best flavor you'll ever have. And, you know, I do really enjoy heirloom flavors, but these hybrids have gotten pretty darn good. So I put a question mark because, while that's what we say, you know, good gardeners would say heirloom tomatoes are the best tomatoes. I don't know that they are. And both can be organic. As we talked about before, organic really just has to do with the growing methods. It doesn't have to do with the actual seeds, okay? So then we talk about hybrid seeds. Hybrid seeds can be a couple of, there's a reason they made a hybrid. So they've cross-pollinated something more than likely. Or they've somehow combined these two varieties to make them either more disease resistant, to travel better, better color. Maybe they want the plants, the tomatoes, to all ripen more at the same time. They're just a little bit more designed to be a variety of things, whatever they wanted them to be. They do live a little longer when you bring them in on your counter. That's what they're designed for. Not all of them, but quite a few of them are designed to ship, I don't know what's going on out there, to ship you know, further distances and to stay riper longer for that travel. They are much more consistent in the size and shape of the color. That's why they're hybrids. That's what they wanted. People don't like odd-shaped vegetables, so we made these hybrids. I don't mind an odd-shaped vegetable. Some people really hate them. You can certainly save the seeds, but there are no guarantees. I don't know what that seed, if you put it in the ground, what you're going to get, because it's a hybrid. You know, they purposefully fixed those seeds to have these particular character traits. Okay. Okay, I do want to talk just briefly about genetically modified organisms. So these, because this really kind of tripped me up at first. I'm like, well, if you cross-pollinate, then you genetically modify this organism. But really the definition is that it's a modified organism containing DNA that's been altered using genetic engineering. Okay? And so approximately 90% of the corn, soybeans, and sugar beets are genetically modified. And these, again, are modified for the same reasons that we have hybrid seeds, because they want them to grow faster, they want them to grow bigger, they want them to have a larger shelf life, perhaps they want them to have more nutrition, depending on what that is. It changes the organism in a way that is not found in nature. Okay? So that in and of itself is controversial. You know, some people like that, some people don't like it. So far, according to, I think, oh, my footnote fell off. I think this was all from the National Geographic. So far, none of them approved for consumption have caused any problems. And probably in your oils and things like that, they are using GMO soybeans and all of those things. But there's no such thing as a GMO tomato. So when I saw this in the, market, I thought, well, that's nice, but don't pay extra for that. It's not there. You're not going to buy a tomato off of the shelf that's been genetically altered in that way. And I printed out a list. What this says is, this is from the United States Department of Agriculture, and it has a list of the bioengineered foods, and it's alfalfa, apple, canola, corn, cotton, eggplant, papaya, pineapple, potato, salmon, soybean, squash, and sugar beets. So these are the GMO foods we currently have, as far as I know, I think, in the United States. So don't pay $1 extra for the non-GMO. Okay, that's all I have for seed packets. Any questions? Yes?
One thing I would mention on the GMOs, none of the GMO foods are commercially available for you to buy. You must be a grower to buy any of the seeds for GMOs.
And a lot of agricultural uses, not really. So
Yeah,
your cows
nothing
might be-
that you're gonna be able to get over the counter.
And I'm not saying they're good or bad. I'm just saying that you don't need to really be that, you don't have to worry about that when you're talking about seeds and transplants in your home garden. Yes, sir?
As far as the heirloom seeds and the hybrids, do they have a different nutritional value at the end of the product when you get to the tomato?
They can. There's such a variety that I can't really tell you definitively. What I can tell you is that some are bred to have a more red color, to have more lycopene, to have less sugar, to have more sugar. So, that's just going to be, you're going to have to go and look at your particular varieties to really determine, okay, why did they make this hybrid? What was the point? When we're canning or when we're putting up our harvest, a lot of times we like these hybrids a lot. If you have an heirloom plant that you're trying to preserve, well, you're getting them, a couple a week here and there. By the time you get enough to make a batch, your older ones might not be worth canning. But if you have a hybrid, boom, they all came at the same time, you're ready to go. You spend your Saturday, you got them preserved. So yeah, just look at your varieties. Yes, ma'am.
So with the hybrid seeds, like if you had a variety of tomato plants, could you accidentally get a hybrid seed?
Oh, I think so. Yes,
Okay.
yes. Beth's our seed expert.
I'm an expert, but I'm gonna talk about
Okay.
this.
I know how to plant them, I know what to do with them, I know how to grow them, but she knows kind of more the how to save them and how to plant them, and she's gonna help us all with that. Anybody else? Okay, that's all I have. Where's Jackie?
It's around the corner.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna, since we have just a second, I'm gonna, was anybody here last month? Yeah, we talked just a hair about seed sprouting. And so yesterday, I was looking at my counter, and I'm done with my seed sprouting, and John, my husband, said, hey, you should bring that in and show them. So I did. This really doesn't have much to do with what we're talking about today, but I went, I'm just a little plug, I am in charge of the newspaper articles for the Big Country Master Gardeners. I find this challenging. I ran out of things to talk about. So email me if you have a topic you are keenly interested in, because I think the last article was about my grapes anyway. But I did one on seed starting. And I just think it's a cool thing. The seeds are a little bit different. I do think, and we are not, as master gardeners, as extension, you can do organic, you don't have to do organic. Seed sprouting, I chose to do organic because you really are eating the seed. And so I didn't want dyes, I didn't want pesticides, I just bought these over at the Natural Grocer. I'm sure they're everywhere. And you just truly put a tablespoon in a mason jar, a wide mouth mason jar. I bought these little vents, and you soak them. You soak them in water, for I think it's 8 hours. Each seed will tell you it's different. And this is like a salad mix, so there's like 5 of them, 5 different seeds. And then after that, you dump them out, and then you just rinse them twice a day. You never take the lid off. So you just rinse them, you shake them around, you dump them out. There might be some water in this, so I hate to. And then I just prop them up on the counter like this, so that they stay kind of dry. And then when I'm done with them, you take them off, and I just have to have this, and you just pull them out. And then they're ready. And the only reason I kind of got into it is because they're supposedly incredibly healthy. So you can add them on salads, you can put them in your smoothie, you can throw them in your stir fry. And I would rinse these. I would obviously do this better at my house, right? Not in front of other people. And then you just leave them here. And then some of the seeds don't sprout. That kind of shows us the germination rates we were talking about earlier. But for the most part, they're just in here. I would dry them very carefully, and then I just leave them in the fridge. But I thought you might like to see that.
Okay, question
Yes.
back here first.
Oh, sorry.
Do you put any absorbic acid on them or vitamin C?
No. No, but I buy seeds specifically for sprouting. And I don't think you have to do that, but I'm new to this. This is like my 3rd or 4th time I've done this, and so I just felt more comfortable with that.
I was curious, does it matter if it's chlorinated, non-chlorinated water that you rinse them with?
I use my tap water.
Okay.
It's probably always better to use your filtered water, I guess. But I rinse mine 2 or 3 times a day, and so, just cheap, so we use my tap water.
So you do have some kind of, you have chlorine in there.
I do. There's chlorine in the water.
What kind of lighting do they need?
So I just put them on my counter. So I thought I brought it with me, but I didn't. These have little feet, or I don't know what you call these. And so I try to get all the water out, so I leave it upside down for about 15 minutes. And then I just sort of tilt it. So I have a dish towel that I just roll up the side so it kind of props it up here. Because you do want some airflow through it. What you saw, I would have normally taken out of the jar yesterday afternoon. They're not normally that crammed in there. It takes it a minute for it to get there. But I started these Monday. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. I started these Monday.
Where did you live?
These, I bought them, of course we don't, but I bought them from, what's it called? No, it wasn't Amazon. It's not, I want to say Hidden Valley, Lee Valley. Lee Valley. They came in a packet of 2, and this supposedly, has this deeper thing here so that the water gets in there easier and there's more airflow. They have metal ones, but the metal ones I'm worried would rust, and I didn't want that. And I put them in the dishwasher. And you use a wide mouth mason jar because you want the air to flow. Anyway, yes ma'am. Lee Valley, they're like a gardening supply store online. L-E-E. L-E-E Valley, yeah. But Gardener Supply has stuff. Burpee probably does, I don't know. And you might just be able to get them at Tractor Supply. So anyway, I don't know. It has to do with seeds, so it's relevant. But. Any other questions? All right. Kathy, are you ready?
Be loud. So a couple things real quick. If you've heard me talk before, you know that I'm a retired history teacher, taught high school, Abilene High, go Eagles. And that I'm used to talking to people who just think they know everything, not people who actually do know things. So it's a little intimidating. So if I start stumbling over my words, just be patient with me, and I'll get my act together at some point. So I was going to kind of tell you how I got into seeds and got interested in it. And it's mainly because I'm cheap and lazy. So sometimes it works in your benefit. But I had a section of land on my property. I have a corner lot. And the west side of that lot is divided by my driveway. So I've got this section over here that's outside my fence. It's hard to water. I got to connect hoses and drag them all the way from the backyard. And it was just not very easy to do anything with. And at one point it had some really nice grass there. It was actually some of the best grass in my yard was over there. I don't know why, but it just worked that way. And then the city came in and did some digging. And there was apparently some water pipes or something, I don't know. And when they got through, that nice long section of lawn went like this.
Oh.
So I called the city and said, hey, y'all left a big old divot in my lawn. Yes. So, what are you going to do about it? Okay, y'all find some dirt, at least fill it in so it's level so when I mow. So I don't know where they got that dirt. But it was full of grass burrs and khaki weed and Johnson grass and just about every other unpleasant thing you can think of. So now I have all these things, out there. And I was like, oh, I've got to do something with that. What am I going to do? Thought about making it into extra parking. No, there's pipes underneath there. You can't put it in permanent. Okay. So I decided to do a wildflower garden. I thought, okay, that'll make sense because I'll put wildflowers out there. They won't need extra irrigation. They'll look pretty good. And so I dug it up, put down cardboard to try to smother out what Bermuda grass was there, which is kind of it worked about 50-50, and planted a bunch of wildflower seeds. And it looks really good. It's different every year. Now this year it didn't look that great. Even the wildflowers were sad this year. It was really pitiful. But one of the interesting things I found was this wildflower packets of seeds that I got from a company called Native American Seed. They're down in Junction, Texas. By the way, go to their their website. They'll send you a catalog, even if you don't buy anything from them, because I'm not endorsing them. I can't do that as a master gardener. But their catalogs are wonderful, have stories in them and articles and things. It's really cool and free. So I bought some seed from them, and it was a seed mix made for our area. And some things came up that I wasn't that familiar with. Now, I spent a few years in the hill country, and so I thought I was pretty familiar with wildflowers. But one of my favorite wildflowers is called wine cup. Have y'all ever seen wine cup? It's little. It's called wine cup because it's wine red. It's pink. It's beautiful. They grow low to the ground. That's the only ones I'd ever seen. Well, in this packet, there was something called tall wine cup. And it's about this big, and it has flowers all up and down the stem. It's an annual, but it reseeds. So then I noticed when the petals fell off the bloom, the seeds were really, you can see them right there. It's like, oh, I can put them in other places in my yard. And so that's what I started doing. I started taking the seeds and putting them in the yard, and taking the seeds and giving them to friends. And then I started trying to figure out some of those other wildflowers. And then I started noticing my larkspurs. I have a lot of larkspurs coming up in the front yard. Some were there from before I had the house, and some I planted. And I started collecting larkspur seeds and things like that. So that's kind of how I got into it, kind of by accident. And so I've been sharing seeds with other master gardeners, and Kathy and Jackie said, hey, you know all about seeds. Why don't you come talk about seeds? And I'm like, I don't know all about seeds. I know about some specific seeds. But I thought, this is an opportunity for me to learn a little bit more and figure it out. So one of the big questions we had was, where on the plant are the seeds? So that's one of the things that I'm going to talk about a little bit today. But we're going to talk about several things. So the topics we're going to cover, seeds come in different packages, and they do look different. And I mean nature's packages, not the paper kind. Rules for collecting, there are some rules out there. Are they ready yet? Because you need to make sure that the seeds are ready before you start collecting them. Let's get started. Clean, label, and storage. And here we go. Quick notes of clarification. Not all flowers produce seeds. Okay? A lot of hybrids don't produce seeds. And some types of plants have a male and a female on separate plants. Okay? For example, possum haw holly. Y'all probably aren't familiar with it, but down in the hill country, it grows along the fence rows. And it's a little bush, drops all its leaves, but it has these beautiful orange berries all over it all through the winter. And having lived for a little while in the hill country, I wanted one of those, and so I got one. I made sure that it had berries on it when I got it, so I knew. And I brought it to Abilene. Well, guess what? There are not enough male possum haws in the area to get the pollination I need. So I get some berries, but I don't get a ton of them. And if I had a male, I wouldn't get any berries on it at all. It's not going to produce seed. Only the female will. So there are some situations where you may not get seed. Okay? And it's, you kind of have to look it up is the best way to find out. That's how I found it anyway. Not all seeds will come true, and some hybrids have sterile seeds. So we were asking a while ago about getting hybrids. If you got an heirloom and an heirloom, will you get some hybrids? Yes. A few years ago, I bought some red tropical salvia. It was in the backyard. And at our plant sale, I got some pink tropical salvia, and it was in the front yard. The next year, I had red and pink in the backyard, and red and pink in the front yard, because they had cross-pollinated. Some hybrids will produce seeds, but they're sterile. Okay? It's just part of the hybridization process that happens. Where the seed is located is a little different on the type of flower you're talking about, but we're going to look at that in a little more detail. Technically, a seed pod and a seed capsule are different. I didn't know that. But I'm not a botanist, so we're going to call them seed pods, okay? If you want to know the difference, feel free to look it up. But to me, it's just easier just to say a seed pod and not worry about it too much. Okay, so seeds come in different packages. One of the flowers that folks were asking me about was petunias. Where are the seeds on petunias? We've got them coming up from seed, but we can't find the seeds on the petunia plant itself. And I thought, I don't know. So that's when I really started looking into where the seeds are produced. So this little part, y'all recognize that. That's a little part of the plant that holds the petals of the flower, right? Okay? Right there in the center, which is right here, or underneath this area, that's where the seed pod is going to form. Kind of see it starting here, and it gets a little bit bigger here, and that's where the seeds are. And you can see that there are little teeny tiny seeds, lots and lots of them produced in there. I'm sure that is not just from one flower, that's from multiples, okay? But that's basically where you're going to find it. It's going to be right behind the flower. Look for that little piece of the plant that holds the petals, okay? So poppies are easy because that little center section, it gets really big, and it looks like this. It becomes a little, like a little pepper shaker, and has seeds on the inside of it. And then this is a lily of some kind, okay? And so that's where it's going to be, that's where it's going to form, right? So in composite flowers, all right? In composite flowers like sunflowers, daisies, blanket flower, coneflower, asters, okay? What we see and think is the flower isn't actually the flower, okay? So this coneflower, for example, we call these petals because as far as most of us are concerned, they're pretty and they're colorful, they're petals. But the reality of it is, this is a whole bunch of little teeny tiny flowers right here. And these are rays. And the rays are there to say to the bees and the butterflies and the other pollinators, yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo, I got a lot of little flowers over here. And every one of those little flowers has some nectar and some pollen, and you want that. And so this center part on the blanket flower, those are actually the little flowers. Same thing with the sunflower. Same thing with, I think this is a daisy of some kind. These are asters, okay? So again, it's that center part of the flower where you're going to see the seeds produced, okay? Now I will tell you in flowers like this and this, sometimes it's hard to tell what exactly is the seed and what exactly is just part of the flower. And it took me a while to kind of figure that out. But remember, seeds usually are kind of dark compared to the other dried out parts of the plant. They tend to be lighter tan. Doesn't always work that way, but general rule. Okay, so these are flowers that form spikes or racemes. Okay, so we've got this is larkspur, this is standing cypress, liatris, salvia. Okay, and again, you're looking for that little part of the plant that holds each individual flower. So on a standing cypress, I don't know if y'all can see it. There's a little part here that holds that little flower, and here, that's where it's going to be. So I've got, this is standing cypress, okay? Each one of these little parts had a flower attached, okay? Just pulled off a couple by accident. And the seeds were inside that. They're not anymore, but there were. They've already fallen out. Okay? Now some of these may actually have some seeds in them, and when we have another break, feel free to come up and look at them. I was going to pass it around, but there's a lot more people than I thought there were going to be. Okay? Lots of times with salvias, for example, I don't even try to take the little teeny thing off and dump the seeds out. I just put on a pair of gloves and go, once all the flowers are done, and then put them in a paper plate or a bowl or something, let it completely dry out, make sure there's not any moisture in it, and then I kind of try to separate it then. Once they're completely dry, it's easier to separate the seeds from the chaff or that extra part of the plant. Okay, this doesn't cover every shape of flower, okay, but it kind of gives you a general rule of thumb and a place to look. Some seed pods will be really obvious. Okay, I'm into the poppies. I've got, this is red yucca. You can definitely tell what the seed pods are on that. Okay, no doubt on that one. Alright, this is actually from one of our hybrid hibiscus. What you're seeing is the part of the plant that holds the flower, but if you look in the center of it, there's a seed pod in there. Now, these are hybrids, so I don't think the seed will come true. But I might check. I might plant them just to see what I get. Alright, I may get nothing. Here's salvia. This one, it's finished blooming. I pulled off some of the little flowers so you can kind of see. But that little green thing, it kind of makes a little packet. It seals up on the end, and that lets it mature. The plants can use up, the seeds can draw energy from the plant, and then when it's ready, that little sealed edge, it looks like an envelope, will pop open, and the seeds will come out. This is gomphrena. I don't know if y'all are familiar with gomphrena. My grandma used to call them bachelor buttons. There's a purple one, this is strawberry fields, there's a pink one. So you might look at that and go, okay, where are the seeds on that? The brown part is the seeds. So if you look at this real close, you'll see lots of little yellow dots. That's actually the flower parts where the nectar and stuff are. And so this part down here, that's the seeds. Okay? And my grandson loves pulling these off and spraying the seeds. I have to tell him not until it's completely dry. So sometimes he'll just go up and he'll go on the bottom of them so the seeds will fall out. I'm like, dude, leave the petals though. Alright, so some things you're just going to have to look more closely at. If in doubt, Google it. Again, it's amazing what you can find on Google, especially if you know what plant you're talking about and you're trying to figure out what the seed looks like on that plant. You can Google it and it'll tell you. Okay? If not, it'll at least get you in the right direction. So there are rules for collecting. Okay? And I got most of this information from the lady at Johnson Wildflower Center. So just kind of keep these things in mind. Okay? If it's on your property, it's your plant, you go for it. Collect away. Right? No rules on your property. If it's on somebody else's property, you need to get permission. Okay? Just bang on the door and say, hey, can I have some of your seeds off your plant? You'd be surprised. If they're gardening people, they'll be, oh yes, I'd love for you to have some seeds. People will drive past my house and stop and ask me for seeds. Once they've done it once, they don't mind coming and doing it again. Okay? So you do need to get some permission. Now, if it's your neighbor's plant and it's hanging over your fence line, technically, from a legal perspective, if it's on your property, it's yours. All the cons that fell off my neighbor's tree, they're mine. Okay? If they fell on my side of the fence, I didn't go in their yard. I just got the ones that were on, and they're really good. Okay, so you do need to get permission. Okay, so what if they're in the public right of way? This is a good example. You go down the hill country, down around Llano, and you look, and it's beautiful. You can collect seeds from the wild, but don't take more than 1/10 of the seeds. Now, I looked at a lot of different things. Some places said don't take more than 1/4 of the seeds. Don't take more than 1/3 of the seeds. Well, one of the things that I know about seeds in the wild is that seeds in the wild don't always hit the ground and grow. Birds get some of them. Bugs get some of them. Critters get some of them. So you have to keep in mind that when you're going to collect some seeds in the wild, you're not the only one collecting those seeds. Okay? And you want to leave enough there that they can grow again. So a couple of years ago, my husband and I decided to try to collect some native milkweed, some antelope corn. By the way, don't plant antelope corn, it won't come up. But it only comes up in the roadsides. It just doesn't like a garden, setting, environment, thank you. It just doesn't like it. I don't know why, it just doesn't. But we went around Ranger. There was quite a bit along the bar ditches. And so you might have 4 or 5 pods on a plant. I might take one. And then we go down the road a little further. You pull over on the side of the road, I jump out with my scissors, I get another one, okay? But I try not to get too much because I do know that there are a lot of things that eat on milkweed seeds. And so a lot of those seeds may not actually make it to germination, to replant. So I need to leave as many as I possibly can, right? If it's in a public park, I don't think there's any laws, but I just think as a good citizen, leave it to reseed. Just to me it seems like it's public property, therefore it should be left to the public. That's just my personal opinion. You can ignore me. I'm a school teacher, I'm used to that. But I'm just saying, to me, from that, it just seems from that perspective, leave it for the moment. Okay? Okay, so this is the key. Are they ready yet? All right? So, the flowers should be dead, and the petals have all fallen off. So, for example, I showed y'all, where it is. This salvia, it's not ready yet. Okay? I pinched it off just to show y'all. This one, part of it's ready, but not all of it's ready. This one is a native sunflower. Oops, I'll get that in a minute. This one is not ready. This one is. Okay? So it needs to be completely dry. And even then, you need to dry it some more. Alright? Seed pod or head should be tan or brown and completely dry. If you're collecting milkweed, for example, the pod will go from green to tan to brown to really like burnt sienna. I mean, it's really, really, really dark. So in some cases, it needs to be really, really brown. Again, you can Google it. That's how I figured out when milkweed seeds were good, was I looked it up and they said, oh yeah, people pick them early and you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that it's almost the point it's going to bust open and try not to let it get to that point because then it has fluff and it goes over. Seeds themselves are usually tan or dark brown. If the seeds still appear green, they aren't ready yet. Now, this is just a stock photo, and I noticed that there's some stuff that's kind of got a green tint to it. I think those are like maybe pine nuts or something, I don't know. But again, you can always Google it, double check. There might be a little green left. Now, one of the questions I get, and one of the questions I have, excuse me, is can you pull them off the plant and let them dry then? Generally, I would say no. They need the energy from the plant for the seeds to grow. Now, if it's starting to dry out, like this one here, it's pretty close. I might take it and try to let it finish drying out because I think it's probably pretty close to the seeds going, but I'm still taking a chance there, okay? But if it looks like it's almost dry, yeah, you probably could take it and let it finish drying out. But it's hard to tell. It's going to be a little bit of guesswork in there. Okay, so let's get started. Once you look at your seeds, determine they are ready to go. It's time to harvest. This is what you're going to need. Sharp, clean scissors or pruners. I would just suggest gloves. It does depend on what you're harvesting. For example, milkweed has a real milky sap that's really sticky and gets on everything. I found that out the hard way. If it's something in your yard and you're familiar with it, it might not be a problem. Like when I pull off the salvias seeds, I always wear a glove because sometimes the dried parts are a little rough on my hands and I just don't want to get cut up by any plant parts. But scissors or pruners, paper sacks or boxes to put the seeds in. I usually use like lunch bag size. I carry a bunch in the glove box in my car. And a pair of scissors. And so in case I see something that I would like to get some seeds off, I do that. If you're going to get seeds off of cactus, they're going to be in the fruit, like prickly pear fruit or whatever. Be sure to understand that fruit on cactus does have spines or little prickly things. Yeah. And so you definitely want to be aware of that. You need a pen for labeling your seeds. Trust me, you want to label your seeds or you're going to end up with a mystery bag. And you're going to go, I know what that is, and then you can't remember. Alcohol or Clorox wipes to clean your scissors or pruners. And they should be wiped down between each plant. You don't want to spread any kind of diseases or fungus or anything from one plant to the other, and you sure don't want to bring it back to your garden. Okay? I had a situation, I was deadheading some plants this summer, and I didn't realize it, but one of the plants had wilt, which is just a fungal disease. And pretty soon I had several things that had wilt, and I had to just jump them because there's nothing you can do once it has it. So be sure and clean those things. And Clorox and wipes are really great because they're so convenient. You know, you don't have to carry a bucket and dunk it and just wipe it down real good. Okay, so you're going to cut off the entire flower head or pod and put it in the sack. Try to choose seeds from the healthiest looking plants. If it's kind of a runt, it's probably going to have runny seeds. Okay? Don't harvest seed heads or pods that have too many insects on them. This is particularly true when you're out in the country, but I've had that problem in my yard, especially in the summer like this. Okay? Usually a hot summer like this, I get spider mites this year, it's mealy bugs. How many people have had mealy bugs this year? Yeah, all of us have. It's awful. They're even on the weeds. It's crazy.
Ours is grasshoppers.
And grasshoppers.
Grasshoppers,
Yeah,
like-
yeah, grasshoppers.
You looking ones.
There's always grasshoppers. Okay, so if the seed pods are smaller than the rest, if they look real chewed up, just go ahead. That doesn't mean there's not good seeds in there, just don't mess with them. If you're out and find some seeds and all you have to put them in is plastic, that's okay. You just want to put them in something paper quick. We're going to talk about why here in just a second. Okay, so cleaning, labeling, and storage. The biggest threat to seeds is mold. It's getting all that moisture out of them. And there have been times I just knew those things were dried out. And I put them in a container, and then I later open up that container, and I have a very unpleasant surprise. It's all full of mold. So you have to make sure they're dry. That's why I use paper or cardboard and not plastic. Some people keep seeds in jars, and I think that's okay if you know for absolute sure that they're completely dry. You can always take some of those little silica gel packets and put them in there to help, but it's no guarantee. That'll help to pull the moisture out, but it's not always 100%. So try to move as much of the chaff as you can. That's all the little plant parts, but don't go nuts and don't get tweezers. It's not worth the time, okay? The seeds are really small and the chaff is dry. Don't go crazy trying to get every little bit. The main thing is let it dry. You can place the seeds in their bags or in a shallow dish in a cool place, spot to dry. I like to put them on top of the refrigerator. That means my grandkids don't knock them off the floor, the dog doesn't knock them down, my mom's cat, however, gets on top of the refrigerator. So it's not always the perfect place, but you need to find a spot, maybe in the laundry room, just some place where it's dry and you're not going to have to mess with them. And I leave them for a long time. I mean, 2 or 3 months. Just leave them. That way I know they're dry. Just kind of spread them out. Good old aluminum pie pan or box lid's good. You know. If they're in the paper sack, that'll work too. Did everybody get that? Okay. All right. So you can hang entire seed heads upside down in their paper sacks. You can see they've done that here. They just put the seed heads in there, hang the whole thing up, let it dry. For seeds that have fluff, and this is mainly milkweed, Flash has a bit of fluff too, but anything that's got that fluffy stuff on them, put the whole pod in a paper sack, put several in there, put some pennies in it, kind of wrap the top up and start shaking. And the pennies will knock the fluff off of most of it. And then you cut a little bottom corner of that sack and the seeds are heavy and they'll fall out. Now do this outside because that fluff will go everywhere. Anything that escapes, it'll be up your nose, it'll be, it's amazing how floaty that stuff is. I don't know if you know this little trivia. During World War II, that's what they used in life jackets.
Really?
Yep, they used the fluff in life jackets because it had so much loft to it. Yeah. Also, hummingbirds love that fluff to line their nest. So sometimes I'll kind of put it in a little mesh bag and set it out. It doesn't usually stay there because it blows out too easily, but it's the thought that counts. Okay, so when I'm labeling my seeds, I like to include what kind of seed it is. I think that's the minimum you should put on there is what kind of seed it is. Because you'll forget. Just will. I try to put the year I gathered them. We already talked about the fact that seeds are viable for more than 1 year. I mean, they found seeds in ancient tombs that were still viable, so they can last for a very long time in the right conditions. But you still, you know, it at least gives you an idea of, well, these are 4 or 5 years old. I'll plant them, see what happens, but I don't get my hopes up. I like to put where I got them if it's not from my yard. For one thing, I make sure I don't go back to that same place to get more later on. Okay, so if I put down, okay, we got these Northern Ranger. Okay, I'm not going to go back. If I'm still looking for milkweed, I'll go someplace else. And if I get really good seeds from there, I might go back the next year. If I'm giving it as a gift, I'd like to include some planting instructions. If it's wildflower seeds, the instructions are usually pretty easy. You take the seed and you throw them on the ground. Because wildflowers need sun to germinate, and so they're not going to need to be covered up with dirt. Best thing to do is throw them out, stomp on them a little bit, or put a board on them and kind of tap it down and get good contact with soil. That's really all you need. General rule of thumb, the bigger the seed, the deeper it needs to be planted. So if you've got little teeny tiny seeds, they don't need to be deep in the ground. Sunflower seed, yes. Though I have sunflower seeds come up under the bird feeder anyway. So I don't know if the dogs are tromping them in or whatever, but they seem to do just fine. When I planted sunflower seeds, I got nothing. The birds are much more efficient planters than sunflower seeds. Okay, so now once you know for sure that they're dry, you've got them packaged up in your little envelopes, you can put them in a storage container. And like I said, you can put them in glass if you're pretty convinced that they're dry. I just use paper and cardboard because I'm paranoid about it. Okay, so I like this idea of the little wooden tray. This is one of those fancy ones you get from the garden supply place online. They're too expensive.
I've seen some people use old ice trays.
Ashtrays, yeah, that would work pretty well. I've seen it a lot in seeds, and my grandparents used to keep seeds in glass jars, keep them in glass jars. So that is an option. All right, so I've been going over flowers because that's what I had experience with. I don't grow a lot of vegetables, but I thought, oh, I better include some because a lot of folks do, and a lot of people, that's what they're going to be collecting. So all the information here I looked up specifically. How do you find the seeds? How do you clean them? All that kind of stuff. So I did the looking up for you. For fruits and vegetables, the main difference is cleaning them. So with beans and okra, you let the pods dry on the vine, and then you remove the seeds, just like any other seed pod. Of course, the okra, what we eat, is the seed pod. Now, with carrots and leafy greens, go ahead and let them bolt. Y'all know what bolting is? When it start getting warm, because they're cool season plants, when it starts getting warm, they start sending out flower heads. And if you want to, what you could do, this is recommended, is have 1 or 2 plants that you plan on letting bolt. And you're not going to worry about the leaves, because the leaves start getting bitter once that happens. This is carrots, right here. That's spinach. Spinach seeds are a little bit bigger, but carrots and lettuce seeds are tiny. This one, what I do is I put that in a paper sack, hang it upside down, let it finish drying, shake it a little bit. Most of the seeds will probably fall out. Okay, peppers, melons, any fruits with large seeds, remove the seeds, wipe off the residue, or rinse them off in colander, lay them out on a paper towel or a cotton filter to dry. Those are pretty easy, the seeds are pretty obvious. Now do understand if you bought that at the grocery store, the seeds may have gotten too cold. You're just going to have to try them and check them out. All right, tomato seeds. There's a little bit more involved with tomatoes. So they say remove the seeds, put them in a bowl of water, and let them soak for a couple of days. Set it on your counter. There you go. After 2 or 3 days, take them out, put them in your strainer, rinse them off really, really, really good. Try to get as much of that residue off as you can. And then lay them out to dry. And again, I'd lay them out, a couple of months. Make sure they're dry.
The seeds won't go through this.
If the sifter has a fine enough mesh, they won't. If it's got a pretty big mesh, they will. So you might want to actually, if you decide that's what you want to do, you might go and try to find you a strainer that's got a real tight mesh to it. Okay, everybody got it? Yes, ma'am.
What about sticking to the paper towel? Does that mean that it's not cleaned out now? 'Cause that's
Maybe,
what I have.
is that what you had?
Yeah, they stick.
I just rinse it again and see if maybe that's what it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that would be my guess, is that there's still a little bit of residue there.
Okay.
Any of my tomato folks in here have any experience with that? That the tomato seeds stick to the paper towel and then you can get it off? Does that mean they're just not rinsed good enough?
Yeah, I mean, you can just kind of pop them off with a paper towel.
Okay, but they're okay?
Yeah.
Alright, cool. Alright, so cucumbers, you're gonna leave one plant for seeds. Again, they get bitter when they get big. So leave the cucumbers on the plant until they turn yellow like this one. Slice through the outer part of the cuke and then pull it open with your hands so you don't damage the seeds. I did not know that. If you cut through it all the way, you can cut through some of the seeds. And then you're pretty much going to remove the pulp with your fingers and then do what you do with the tomatoes, which is put them in a glass of water for a few days or a jar, let them soak a little bit, rinse them, and then put them out to dry.
Excuse me. Is it only the cucumbers that you have to let it get old on the vine? Like tomatoes, you can just get.
Apparently, you don't, yeah, that's my understanding. I don't know why. That's what I've read in my experience. I haven't planted cucumbers. I have planted cucumbers. Okay, so just like with flowers, you're going to let them dry thoroughly. You're going to put them in a container of your choice. Don't forget to label them. Store it in a cool, dry spot until you're ready to plant them. Okay, for additional information, check out YouTube, the internet, Google. You can find lots of information out there, especially if you're dealing with a specific vegetable or fruit. Yes, ma'am?
Well, you were talking about like the tomato seeds being on the paper.
Mm-hmm.
You can plant the whole thing.
Oh.
Plant the paper towels and the seeds and everything.
I hadn't thought about that. That's a good idea. Yeah. I just kind of spread them out.
Yeah. Repeat the question.
She said if your tomato seeds are stuck to the paper towel, you can plant the whole thing because the paper towel will break down. So when you put them on the paper towel, you might want to spread them out a little bit. Probably better anyway. And that way, you know, probably tear the paper towel. Yep, in strips. Real quick, don't forget fall plant sale. Put that up just for. Do we have any other questions that I can attempt to answer?
Tell us about your success with planting wild milkweed in
So,
your garden, in your house.
so far, my experience with planting wild milkweed in my garden has been a complete and total failure. I have not had a single plant come up. I know, this is one of the things you have to understand about wildflower seeds. Sometimes they don't come up when you think they will. That doesn't mean they won't come up in a year or two. Bluebonnets, for example, will not come up unless the conditions are right. So just because you planted them and they didn't come up in the spring doesn't mean they're not going to come up. It just means that the conditions weren't right. Now, I don't know if that's the case with milkweed, but I was talking to a friend who's very big into milkweed and butterflies, Jean Dotson, and she said she didn't feel like antelope corn did well here. It does a little bit better east, the further east you go, because the soil's just different. She suggested for me zyzotes and broadleaf, and so I'm going to try some broadleaf because I know where some is. Some are. Yes, ma'am.
I actually started this showies the way you know
Uh-huh.
in my house, and then you have to stratify the seeds. You have to put them in a refrigerator.
Yep.
They have to go through a chilling period. Now, I don't know when you put them in the wild, it's the same thing. You let them dry, you have to put them in the refrigerator to go through that period. Because I started some. I've got a bunch of it in my house. But I didn't put really it stems out, you know. It's kind of floppy, but I have it in my house.
Yeah. One of the things about a lot of seeds is they need that freeze thaw to crack the seed coat. Milkweed is one of those. You can replicate that in your refrigerator, and again, I would Google it, and it'll tell you, you know, how cold it needs to be, how long you need to keep it in there. Most wildflower seeds should be planted in the fall. Okay? I always forget to tell people that. But wildflower seeds, if you're planting bluebonnets, you're planting lancelet coreopsis, purple coneflower, anything like that, what's going to happen is you're going to put that seed out. 2 of the months we get our most rain, August and September, okay, because it's the fair. And so that's going to hopefully give them some water. The seeds will germinate, and then they're going to kind of just simmer there for a little while. You may actually see some plants. My larkspurs usually start putting plants out like in December. They'll just stay, little tiny plants like that. Same thing with a lot of my wildflowers, not necessarily my bluebonnets, but some of my other ones, cutleaf daisy and some of those, they'll pop up above the ground and they just kind of stay there. Well, what's happening is they're putting all their energy into the roots. And even if it's cold, if it gets really cold, they might freeze back. But I didn't lose any larkspurs in the big freeze. I didn't get a whole lot this spring, but I think it was the drought. Yes?
I know.
Sorry. Let me get the one back and then I'll get you right here.
How do you collect basil seeds? Because you're supposed to deadhead them so they continue to grow. So do you collect them when they're green?
I think you probably, with basil, probably could. That's what I would do. Or leave one plant that you're going to use for seed. You can try either one.
So for bluebonnets, I know that technically you're not allowed to like pick them inside the road, but can you get the seeds off of them to plant them at your house?
Okay. You actually can pick bluebonnets, but don't. Okay. There's not.
We got a ticket for it. He said you're not allowed to do that.
It's actually not against the law.
He gave us
didn't
a
know.
ticket because we took 2.
Yeah.
The seeds I bought, none of them germinated. None.
Yeah.
So we got 2 plants and he gave us a ticket.
Yeah, he shouldn't have. It is actually not against the law. That rumor kind of got spread because they don't want you picking the bluebonnets. You can collect seeds off of them. Again, I would, kind of spread out where I'm collecting from, that kind of thing. With bluebonnets, the plants are going to have pretty much died back by the time the seeds are looking good anyway, so there won't be any flowers on them. And yes, you can collect any wildflower seed. Again, just don't collect too much in the same spot because you want to leave some there for nature. But yeah, I've looked that up a couple of different places. There is no law in Texas, but it's a widely held belief. And so people said, they just, spread that information. I don't pick bluebonnets or wildflowers in general because I like the wildflowers to be where they are. So I just plant seeds and then I get them in my yard. But yeah, you shouldn't give any of those.
It's kind of like the tomato plant sign, non-GMO.
Yeah, because it doesn't even exist. So yeah, it's not even an issue. But yeah, you can collect wildflowers in the wild. You can collect the seeds. But I would be careful because not everybody knows the rules. So you don't want to
Try to do it on your property.
Yes, or find someone who's got some on their property. But again, bluebonnets are persnickety. They want to bloom when they want to bloom. And I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said you have to abuse them because I had mine planted in the soil and all pretty, and they said nope.
They don't like
and
it.
then we finally got some, and we got 2 to grow, and I'm serious, we had forgotten we had planted them.
Yep. They don't like really high fertility soil. They like rocky soil. That's why they grow good in a bar ditch. A lot of wildflowers don't like a lot of really fertile soil. They like caliche or rocks or things along those lines. The bluebonnets I have in my wildflower garden don't do very well. I'll get a few every once in a while. One will pop up. But most of the time when you find bluebonnets in this part of Texas, because they're actually not native to our part of Texas, they're native to the hill country. They've been planted by the highway department. They have developed a couple of different types that are better for sandy soil. Clay soil is still a little hard on them, but you'll see them again in the bar ditch. Why? Because there's lots of rock from where they did the paving. All that rock gets thrown over and knocked over and that kind of stuff. So the soil's not very fertile there, and they tend to do a little bit better. But wildflowers can be temperamental. They're little divas. Any other questions?
I have a question about the
bluebonnet seeds for one. I had a couple of bluebonnet seeds. I bought a garden, like the garden center. Well, the seeds already bust open and spread all over the grass. Now I got them growing in the grass. They're all inside the flower beds.
Yeah.
They're about this tall. But do you think they'll survive, or should I move them?
I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I believe bluebonnets are annuals. They come up new from seed each year. So probably what will happen is they'll die off this winter, but if they were big enough to set seed, look for them in the spring. Now wildflowers, most wildflowers have a taproot, which makes them very difficult to transplant. That's one of the problems with milkweed. That's not, they don't grow it, excuse me, allergies. Don't grow it in garden centers because it has this big long taproot that it sticks out. That's how come they can get water in our environment, is because they're going deep down the ground, so it's very hard to grow them. Bluebonnets are going to have a taproot too, so it may be hard to transplant. You can occasionally find them at nurseries with bluebonnets, and I have planted some of them, but I've never had them come back. And John was nodding when I said annual, so.
Yeah.
Are the red bonnets easier to plant, or is it pretty much the same?
I haven't tried those because they have hybridized some of the bluebonnets. There's the Aggie bluebonnet, which is the maroon. There's a white one. All of those were actually, they developed in nature, and then they took those plants and seeds off those plants, and then kind of went from there. So bluebonnets do come in other colors. You just don't find them quite as commonly. But I haven't tried the maroon ones.
One more question. What about when you were talking about the alcohol wipes or Lysol wipes? Can you use the Lysol spray?
Probably, I would guess. It's got enough alcohol in it. Just, you might do that so it gets down into the that little screw set, so if there's any bacteria in there, you've got it covered. But yeah, I would think it would probably work. Any others?
Beth, if we're going to take a break, I would like to suggest that if the women would like to go through this door straight ahead, we have a big restroom down there that's got about 8 stalls in it, rather than try to jam up all of this one down here.
Yeah. Did y'all hear that? There's another ladies' room. If you go down this hall into that other big room, it's going to be to the right. There's also another men's. I just don't know if we're having as much overflow in the gentlemen's as we do with the ladies. But there's only 2 stalls here, and there's several in the other ones, so if you don't want to stay in line. I do have some different seed pods and stuff up here. Some of them are mine, some of them are things that Kathy brought. So if you want to come and look at them during the break, feel free, or if you want to come at the end, we can do that too. That's fine. Okay, that helps, yeah. Over from the correct side. So there are some different seed pods you can look at, and you can ask. I tried to. Is it a percent? Yeah. That's what I'm guessing. So, if there are no questions, I think we're going to do another little drawing real quick.
Okay. How many?
So, okay. We're going to talk about seed starting. And I want to say a few little caveats, anyway. Like Beth said, wildflowers, you just throw them in your backyard. Many vegetable seeds, cucumber seeds, I really would recommend you start those from seed in your garden. So not everything needs to be started from seed in your controlled environment. But certainly tomatoes do, eggplants do, and bell peppers. They're going to do better if you do them inside. And there are certain flowers. Sometimes, and I've attempted to do pansies. And I haven't really mastered that yet, but I will get that down. But there are some things that you want to start early just because you want them to be big and beautiful by the time they're supposed to be put out. But I'm going to primarily focus on what I know, and that's going to be the vegetable seed starting. So I just wanted to draw your attention to this is off of the Extension website. So we're here in Region 2. And so I have them backwards, but I wanted to show that we're Region 2 first. And then you can find these planting dates, really just for almost anything. This is specifically for the fall. And so in Region 2, for fall, this is when you put out your transplants. And so you need to remember, as we talked about before, that the seed starting has to come before that. So you want your seeds to have grown into little transplants by these dates to put out. And there's other ones for spring, and you can look those up, and they'll have average frost dates, etc. Okay, so then I just kind of wanted to show you, we showed you the seed packets earlier, but around here, many of us have the opportunity to buy seeds in bulk. And so it might look like this. I think this might be down at Hardwick's Rising Star. And they just have all of these things, and they just have them in these giant big bags, and you just pay for them by the scoop. So 50 cents a scoop, that's usually what you're looking at. Different seeds have different size scoops. And so sometimes you'll see it like an Ace Hardware or something like Jackson Seed. You'll see that they'll have a whole kind of like the measuring scoops that you would use for baking on a chain next to this, and then it'll say on the bag or what am I trying to think of, bottle, jar, I don't know what they're in. It'll say scoop A, scoop B. And then it'll just tell you how many scoops there are. You take an envelope, you stick 2 scoops of it, you put on there, I have 2 scoops of cucumbers, 50 cents a cucumber, you get your whole seeds. You get a whole garden's worth of seeds for $1. It's pretty great. And at the last Saturday school that we had, I was talking about how our summer gardens, our spring and summer gardens, at least mine, I think I speak for all of us, have been just dismal. I mean, it's just awful. And so I said, hey, let's put our eye on our fall gardens. Let's try to keep, I'm going to try to keep my tomatoes just alive until it cools off, and then hopefully I'll get a good, nice fall crop of tomatoes. But somebody mentioned, well, hey, where do you find transplants if you wanted to plant a fall garden? Well, a lot of times that is more difficult. People don't think about planting those vegetables in the fall. Well, that's where seeds really are just a great way to get a great fall garden. We already talked about that. Okay. So now really all I have after this is a series of pictures from my own seed starting. And they're from various years, so you're not going to see the same exact things, but I just thought we'd kind of walk through what does it look like to start seeds. And so you can do this in a number of ways. You can do it, there's more expensive ways, there's less expensive ways. It kind of depends on how committed you are to it. If you want to go ahead and spend some money on it, I will tell you that I've just been doing it for so many years that it was worth it to me to go ahead and buy like this this seeds. Now these I shouldn't be too embarrassed to bring these in here. They are dirty and they've been sitting in my garden room because I'm not going to need them right now. But these are kind of decent thick plastic containers that I can put in the top of my dishwasher when I'm done with them and then use them the next year. So obviously these are a little more expensive. You could use egg crates. You could cut out the bottom of egg crates and use those. It just sort of depends on what do you want to invest in, what's your priority, what do you want to spend your money on this season. So these are what I've used up here. And you start filling these seeds. You don't use normal potting soil. There's actually a mix, and there's a million different kinds. This just is what I had in my garden room, but it's a seed starting mix. It is important that you use the seed starting mix. I'm sure you can go online and you can concoct all kinds of different things, but you don't use a potting mix. You want a very light soil that absorbs and moves the water through it. Okay. So, did I not bring the seed cells? I guess I didn't bring the most important part, or it's still in my car. Oh, sorry. Oh my goodness, I don't know what I did with them. Well, obviously, there's another part of this, and that's this top part right here that holds the dirt. And so what you're going to do is you're going to fill up this whole part with your seed starting mix. You're going to go ahead and wet it down. And then I put 2 seeds in each cell. These are tomatoes, this is eggplant, these are bell peppers, and these are empty. But I'll probably do herbs in those. That's what I've done in the past. Okay. So you have your seed cells. with your dirt and your seeds in them, and you need to label them. I'll tell you, you need to label them, and then you need to label what side faced you, so you know which way they go. Because this year I planted tomatoes, I had no idea what I was planting. I completely messed them all up. I had them all turned around. And I usually have this little guide anyway. So I do recommend these little popsicle sticks to stick in there. Then you have this tray. So this tray is on the bottom, and you're going to fill it up with water. Then you have this seed kind of a mat, and you're gonna soak it so that it's completely wet. And then what happens is you put this little tray in here, you put your seed mat on top of it, and then it folds down just over the edge so that this part of this watering mat stays in the water in your tray, okay? And then you're going to put all of that in here, and then you're going to put your seed cells right on top of this, okay? And the seed cells, this soil is going to wick that moisture off of this watering mat, which is going to take the water from your reservoir, and it's going to kind of continuously water it without overwatering it, okay? And so all you're doing is checking, is there water in this reservoir? If there is water in the reservoir, you're good. Yes?
I noticed that the seed starter makes it super dry, really powdery.
Uh-huh.
Do you like super soak it?
I don't. I put it in here, and I water it with my little squirter from my sink. And I just make sure it's good and wet, and then I make sure this is super wet. And then I just put it in there. Now you gotta watch it, because it's amazing how fast it's gonna go through that water. And so really, every day you need to stick your finger in here and make sure that there's water in here to keep it going, okay? Yes?
What is that called?
This thing, it's like a seed starting kit is what I would call it. Actually, you know what? I think I agree. Oh my goodness. My mom would be mortified. So this is not the one I have here, but I have one that's just called a self-watering 32 extra large cell seed starting system. And it came with everything I needed, as far as the reservoir, the stand, the watering mat, and then the seed cells. And I don't know if this one came with a cover. But anyway, that's what it is. And this one, like, you can find this at Tractor Supply. Pardon me? I couldn't, I don't
I
know.
usually have them at Lowe's.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, they're any place that sells gardens.
And you don't have to get, I mean, I'm kind of a vegetable nut. You don't have to get 32 of them. You know, you can get a little 12-cell one. You can even get a 6-cell one. They've got all kinds like that. Okay. So then once you get this done like this, you want them to germinate. And so in order to germinate, they need to be a little bit warm. And so we're usually starting these in February or January even, and so it's not warm where we're starting them. And so I do have a heating pad. Just called a seedling heating mat. I'm sure you could use any heating pad, I don't know, but this is specifically for my my seeds. You just plug it in, you just leave it on full time, and it's gonna heat. So I have this, and I put my seeds right on top of it. And really now I have 2 of these, so I just turn it like this and have it on that way. And I leave that heating pad on until they start to germinate. I also want it to stay very moist in there. And so depending on what kind of a kit you buy, you can have a lid like this. So you'll have your seeds, you'll have your seed cells. You'll just put this right on top of it. And you can take it off kind of to water and stuff. But for the most part, you're going to leave it alone. It's going to get very moist in there. I'm going to show you some pictures. And then we'll keep it like that. Let me see. So see, here's what you can see. So this is just a picture through the top of that plastic of my little seedlings, and you can see they're starting to germinate here. Can you see that? Okay. And so these are those leaves I was talking about earlier. These little leaves right here. Pretty much they all kind of look the same. There's a name for those leaves.
Cotyledon.
cotyledon leaves. And so these are not considered true leaves. They're just the leaves so that the seed can start to be alive, okay? And so that's what we're looking for. Once we see this germination, and you can see they're not all going to come up at the same time. And so I very likely put my plastic cover back on top of it and let it continue to germinate until I got a good number of them to come up. Sometimes you don't get this lid. You don't really need the lid. Just get a piece of wax paper or a piece of press and seal or something and put that over your seeds. Okay, so here they are. You still can kind of see them. It's starting to get a little less, water droplet on here, but they're just looking a mess in there. But they're all starting to kind of grow. They're all starting to do their thing. Okay, so this is what I was talking about too. You might get this paper here, and then you can put that on there. And once they germinate, you don't really need the cover on them anymore. So once they kind of come up, take that cover off of them, and really you don't need the heating mat on anymore. They germinated. They've done what they're supposed to do. Now, that's going to depend on how cold of an environment you have them in. So when it was the horrible freeze of February of 2021, I brought them inside. And I really don't like having dirt in my house, but they weren't going to live in my little garage garden room. So I brought them. Okay. And so, let's see. Jeez. I was doing a thing here. And so, really, for the most part, these vegetables germinate in darkness. They don't typically germinate. And if you were really, a good gardener, you probably wouldn't combine things that don't need the same light requirements, water requirements in the same seed cells. But I did. I had some extra seed cells. I wanted to grow some herbs, so I did. But they didn't germinate as quickly. Some of these things took a lot longer, so I just cut out newspaper and stuck it over there so that my grow light could go on my little seedlings and they could do their thing without hopefully messing with my other seeds too much. Does that make sense? And it worked. So my cilantro, this was anise, this was lemon balm, and so some of them just didn't come up, and so I thought, well, I'm just going to cover them, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. But you can see most of my seed cells have something in them. Well, I probably only put 2 seeds in each seed cell, and they come up just fine. Okay, this, okay. So what I'm kind of pointing out here, so I have migrated all kinds of things. So this was my first grow light, and it just sat nicely over my seed cells, and I turned it on, and I have it on a timer. And so I would leave the seed light once everything was germinated, it came up, and I turned off the heating mat. I didn't need that anymore. So now I have little bitty, let's see. Yeah, little bitty seeds. And then I put them under a grow light. And this, like I said, was my first one. I don't know, Tractor Supply, I probably got it. But since then, I've got a Mobad grow light. It's giant, and I love it. And so these, you need to be careful. You need to read what your grow light says, because if they're too close, you can burn your plants, and they're making all kinds of advancements in those. So this just hangs from my ceiling, and it's on chains so that I can adjust it. And so as you can see, these seedlings are going to go straight to the light. And you can see these did not. So these were just kind of crazy. I have a door over here with a window in it, and so they just started growing. I'm sure I've turned them around by now. But I mean, they look pretty unruly and pretty crazy. But don't let that distract you, right? They're just little seedlings. You're fixing to put them outside. So it's okay if they look crazy. Just try to kind of get them going in the right direction again. Put your light in the right place. Put it, at the right height, and it'll be okay. So these are some more. I'm not really sure what the benefit of these pictures are, but here you go. These, sometimes they do. So these look pretty good. I've kind of got them going in the right direction, but then you've got this one that's decided to do this, And I've got tomatoes sometimes that will lay over, and then they root in this one. So I planted them in this one, But they decided to make a home in this one. Well, okay, I don't care where they live. They could stay. Okay, so now, and these I think are probably, I don't think I should have let them get this big. Okay, so I'm going to argue this was a little bit, I needed to get on the stick a little bit better here, but I didn't. So what I do next is, oh, and the one thing I did add that I don't have a picture of here is I do have a fan over here. And so I leave that fan on, and it kind of hardens up the stems a little bit. It makes them a little bit, and I'll turn my seed trays a little bit, you know, so that they kind of, but I just think it's kind of nice. It's a little bit of some fresh air. You have to water more because that air is going across the soil. But I found that it just makes a nicer plant. Okay, so like I said, I don't know that I'd let them get this big. I think this is a little too much. But that's what happened that year. And so from here, I'm going to take each seed cell out, and I personally, there's a million ways you can do it, I put them in solo cups. I have an ice pick, I poke 3 holes in each one of them, and I write with a Sharpie on the outside which plant it is, and then that's where I transplant them to. And so they look like this. Some of them are ready. Your eggplant and your peppers take a little longer. These were those herbs that you saw. And these are, well, that's some herbs too. So, you know, these were just better. These still needed a little more time. And I move them back in here, depending on the time of the year.
Do you add more starter mix, or do you add potting soil mix to fill up the rest of the soil?
That's an excellent question. Okay, I don't think I'm alone. I mean, I'll spend money on some stuff, but I'm pretty cheap when it comes to those things. So the starter mix, you see my spoon right here, you know, I'll kind of dig it out, but then I use gardening mix to put it in there. It's not even potting soil. It's just gardening mix. So you're gonna have, that gardening mix is a little cheaper. I do use a Miracle Grow because it's got some fertilizer in there, but you don't have to. You know what, that reminds me, I need to tell you something else. But I just use gardening mix, and I pull out the big giant chunks. Because, you know, sometimes you'll get like a thing of bark in there. I kind of sift that out. But that's what I use. And it's kind of fun. I got these clear ones one year just because I wanted to see what the roots look like in there. I mean, it's kind of fun to watch. You can really see them just sort of take over the space. Oh, I wanted to tell you, on this, I brought this fish emulsion stuff. Like I said, it's not a pleasant aroma, but if you have a place to put it, once I get those leaves, those little leaves on my my seedlings, when I put water in here, I do add a little bit of fish emulsion to that mixture, just to give them a little bit of nutrients and a little bit of fertilizer. Okay? And so these, you know, we're still just kind of humming along. So these are my basil plants here. You can kind of see, now the leaves are very distinct. You know, you can tell what you've got. And then I just put them outside. This is right outside. My garden room is right there. I just put them all on my back porch. And that's where I watered them. Now you'll notice that this isn't, you'll notice I don't wear shoes when I water them. It's in a nice corner. Because I'm protecting them, right? This is what we call hardening off, okay? So when you get your plants, even if you just buy transplants from a nursery, I strongly suggest you harden off your plants before you put them outside. These have lived in this beautiful little area, right? They're here, they've got this perfect light, there's no breeze, they might have my fan, but even that's pretty consistent. If you take these guys right outside, the West Texas wind's gonna break them, and then the sun's going to burn them. I mean, that's a lot to ask of them. So we're going to harden them off. We're going to put them out here in this kind of protected area. And kind of depending on what time of year it is, you leave them out there all day or you don't. This tray, I have this little tray here. And so sometimes early on, I'll just take the tray and put it outside with all these solo cups on it, and I'll bring the tray back in. Especially if it's going to be too cold. But otherwise, I'm just leaving them out here. I'm keeping them watered. I'm moving them around, like this one right here. I'm thinking, I don't like that one. I'm going to move it, try to make it grow a certain way, or just protect it a little bit more from the wind.
Are you watering with city water?
Repeat the question.
Oh, she's asking if I'm watering with city water.
City water.
And I don't know. Probably my seeds mostly are city water. I also have a well, and so sometimes I'll fill it up with well water. I'm not using any filtered water. I'm not using any distilled or bottled water. So it's either out of my faucet or it's out of my well. Once it's in the garden, that whole system is just on well water. So this right here, I honestly don't know. I think if I'm using that hose, it's well water. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I've been thinking more and more about, drinking or using water with additives and things that are in the chlorine, fluoride, that I prefer not to put on my plants, but maybe it's going to be difficult not to.
Yeah, I don't, so the question was, the additives in the water, we're putting those on our plants. I don't really know. I don't really have an answer. I just know I mostly use well water once I'm growing, and I think it's got, we've had it analyzed, it's got certain, levels of compounds in it.
But most people don't have that.
Yes, yeah. So, I would use city water. I think that your homegrown tomatoes, even with your city water, is better. I think they taste better, certainly. But surely they've got to be a little bit better for you than what's bought in the grocery store. Maybe not the farmer's market. Okay, and then after they're hardened off, so how long do they need to be hardened off for? You kind of have to look at your plant and see. Some of them are going to be very mad at you that you put them out here. And seriously, they're not going to like it. They're going to turn brown. Some of them are going to have to kind of regrow new leaves. Let them. But most of them are going to do okay. And once they're out here, I would think a week or two, maybe a little bit longer if you have the time, they're going to be just fine. And then they just go right into I have raised beds, so that's where they're going. So these are my tomatoes. And then these are my eggplants and peppers. And they just go right in like any other transplant. I think that's all I have. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you put like a little hoop thing when it gets cold, starts to get colder, to extend the growing season?
I don't. So the question is, do I put like a row cover or some kind of a hoop thing on this? I am a lazy, entertaining gardener. I don't, this is a hobby. This is for fun. Once it gets hard, I'm not. So no, I really don't. And I really think it grows in my spring garden. It grows just fine. I don't have any trouble. I don't have to keep them, they grow straight. I will cage these almost immediately, my tomatoes. And then, just because once you have them planted, you know where your roots are. So once you stick that cage in there, you know you're fine. Whereas if you wait a little bit, once you put that cage in there, you sure might mess up your roots or cut them. I don't know that it hurt anything, but it might. So no, I really don't do anything to them. We water them, and I cage up my tomatoes, and that's about it. Then I eat them. So like right now, these are the tomatoes. I have this box full of tomatoes right now. And so like right now, they're not doing a darn thing.
Yeah.
I'm just keeping them alive. I'm gonna wait. Hopefully we'll get some more, and then I'll pick them all, and we'll go from there. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when you first plant the seeds, you have like 2 seeds in each cell.
I do.
At what point do you separate or thin, or what do you do?
Okay. So when I put them, so you're supposed to thin out, right? You're supposed to not have that many tomatoes. I can't help myself. And so more often than not, I get 2 tomato plants in each seed cell. And so I put them in 2 separate solo cups. Yeah, that's what I do. And then I try really hard to give them away to people. I try really hard not to plant them. But then ultimately, they'll either go in the trash, I'll throw them in or hopefully I found a home for them. But yeah, and then you do have some attrition, So sometimes when you put them out there, you might lose a tomato plant in the hardening process. So it's nice to have a couple extra. But yeah.
When do you use the fish oil?
The fish oil I use when I'm doing my seeds.
Okay.
So once they've germinated and I've got the 2 leaves, then instead of just using water, I'll put a little fish oil in there, but it's very, not much. This is not one of those things that if a little is good, a lot is great. This is if a little is good, even more a little bit. Really, we don't want much in there. Yes, ma'am.
Do you use the little jiffy pots, the little ones that just expand? Have you tried those? Rather than doing your seed
cells?
soil, little pots?
So I've used, so she's asking about seed starting pots, because they've got a couple kind. They've got like I think they're like coconut fiber kind of ones that expand.
Yeah, they expand out. It's a pea.
I don't. I have used them and then I've planted them, because I think you can plant them right into the ground. I have not had particularly great luck with that. Yeah.
I was going to say, there's a net around those that you have to cut off before you plant.
Sure.
Otherwise, it strangles out your plant.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, you got to follow the directions for sure on any kind of a pot. You can certainly try it. I don't know. I felt like, and this is my own personal opinion that is not validated by anything, but I felt like it kind of messed with my watering a little bit. I wasn't able to really keep a good consistent water with them. I felt like they took so much water that it was difficult to keep the soil at just a good, solid, consistent moisture. I don't know if that's true. That's what I thought.
How did you come up with the idea with the solo cups, like putting the stuff in there?
How did I come up with the idea? Well, I'm kind of cheap. I probably just had a party and had a lot left over. I don't know. And I'm shameless. I use them over and over and over again.
We do that too. We actually came up with the idea because we buy croissants at Sam's, and so when we're done with the croissants, we use them and we transplant the stuff in it because it's already got a lid, so you just close it.
Perfect.
And then when you're done with it, you can reuse it or throw it away.
Yeah, let's just be resourceful. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's fun to use what you got. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever tried those winter sewing methods?
The witch's sewing method?
Winter sewing method. You take the milk jug, you cut it 3/4 of the way around so it has a hinge, pop the lid off, recycle or whatever. And then you just put your seed starting mix in there. You put, like I usually, 4 seeds in there. And I've done it for like 4 years now. And 100% germination. You don't have to really, you have to check to make sure it's got water, but you just leave them outside all winter. I start them in end of January. And I have big plants, some of them, like we did corn one year with the grandkids. The corn was this far out before we got it planted in the ground.
Yeah.
But it's super simple and cheap.
Oh, yeah. And there's a whole lot of ways to start seeds, for sure. And you can be pretty resourceful and pretty, and I haven't done that. I haven't put them outside and started them outside in January. Usually because it's cold in January and I don't want to go outside when it's cold. It's not a good reason, but.
They're already hardened off and everything.
Yeah.
By the time you're done.
That really would be very efficient. So she was talking, did you hear her? Did she have a microphone?
No, she didn't.
So she was talking about taking like a milk jug or something. Is that fair?
Like water jugs.
Water jugs.
Yeah,
and so you cut off the top of them, and then you put the seeds in there, leave them outside. Is that right? In January or whenever you would start your seeds inside, and then just kind of monitor them there, and then they're hardened off and things already when you're ready to put them in your garden.
You put the lid, the top back on.
The top back on it.
Or you can cut it where there's like a little plastic hinge.
Yeah.
That is to create a little greenhouse. And you leave the lid off so water can get into it. I've done it with flowers.
Yeah.
Take your spray
Yeah.
bottle or something.
I think it worked great, yeah.
And I tried the solo cups inside like the big foil barbecue.
Yep.
The top.
Yep.
Just took like your wood burning tool and popped a bunch of holes in it. Did the same thing to the cups and put the cups in there. Tried that last year. And it was easier because then you don't have to take your little transplants and put them into a bigger set.
Sure. Sure. Oh yeah, definitely experiment. Experiment with what you've got. Yep. A lot of other methods will work well.
I haven't done vegetables, but I do my perennial seeds. That way, winter sowing.
Yeah.
And ideally, you should do it around Christmas, December 20th, because the seeds have to get cold. But I usually do mine after Christmas in January. It's a great way to start perennials. It forms a really good root system, and you really take them out of the jug and you take little clumps of flowers and then plant them. But it's a
great way to do greenhouse.
Well, great, great, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, good tips? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any trouble with damping off? Every time I seem to plant seeds, I end up with them getting some kind of fungus and stuff.
I really don't have a lot of trouble with that, but I would suggest putting that fan near them. You know, I really think that that's helpful. I think it'll kind of keep that moisture on the top and on the leaves. You know, something gets on there, it'll just, try that. Anything else?
What about for the tomato plants? Can you, like, our tomato plants right now, they're huge, but they don't have any tomatoes on them. But for fall, can you go ahead and like trim part of your tomato plant, root it, and then just start a new plant?
You
that
bet.
way?
You bet, absolutely.
I don't think the ones that are gonna make it through.
Mine are going to make it, and I'm going to have a tremendous tomato crop this fall. Just wait and see. Just wait and see. But absolutely, you can. Now, again, that heirloom and the hybrid, that's going to matter. So pay attention to what kind of plant it is. And if you root it, well, you get, you know, the same kind of plant that you're anticipating. But absolutely. Absolutely.
Right now, they don't have any tomatoes, because they're trying to survive.
Exactly.
That's why they have all the fruits.
Exactly. Yes, ma'am.
So is there something you can put on the tomato plants now to make them flower?
No, we just have to wait for it to cool off. Yeah. Now, you want to make sure that they're going to get pollinated, you know, so, but we usually have plenty of wind. Do you have more than one? Like, you have a couple? Yeah, no, there's nothing to do but wait. Nothing to do but wait. All right, anything else? Yes, ma'am.
We planted our tomatoes, the tomato plants themselves got huge, beautiful. We have not gotten one tomato
That's right.
off of any of our plants.
That's right. And we would expect that this year because of how hot it is.
We had them planted in the shade.
It wouldn't matter. It would not matter. It's not a matter of just direct sun. It's actually the temperature of the air. And so they are not going to set buds. Really, typically, I think the average is sort of over 95. I think that's plus or minus a couple degrees. But you're not. We wouldn't expect you to. But the fact that your tomato plants look good means you've got to wait for your fall tomato harvest.
See, we've never done that before. We've always done them and then.
Leave them alone. Are they? Do you know what kinds they are? Are they indeterminate or determinate?
I don't know. They were some heirloom.
Okay.
It said heirloom on the
Okay,
tomato
yeah,
package.
but hang on, just wait a second.
But I've never had tomatoes do that to me before.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, beautiful
Just
plant.
hang on. Just wait for it to consistently cool off, and then hopefully you'll get them. And then what will invariably happen is they'll be about the right size but green when the first freeze comes. Just pick them all, bring them inside, they'll ripen right in your house, and fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
You said buy seeds in bulk at Jackson Brothers?
Well,
I know you're not recommending them, but locally in town, that's one of the places we can get them in bulk.
I actually don't know that for sure. You guys know Jackson? Yeah,
Jackson Brothers.
Yeah. And it's handy, it's easy. All right, anything else? Jackie, do we have anything that we need to?
Got more door prizes? Thanks.